We'll be going over IRS Form 12153, Request for a Collection Due Process or Equivalent Hearing. So taxpayers may use this tax form to request a collection due process or CDP hearing with the Independent Office of Appeals within the Internal Revenue Service. So if you received a letter, usually this will be a letter that's noticing you of a federal tax lien or a proposed or actual levy, then you would use this form to request a collection due process hearing. So we'll go over this tax form. We'll point out a couple of differences between this and some of the options that the IRS has to offer. So the focus of this form, though, is going to be completing each of these spaces. We do have lots of other resources, and anything that's referenced in this form you can either find in the accompanying article, where we'll put a link in the show notes, or one of the other articles or videos that we'll also put links to in the show notes. So different tax forms, different parts of the IRS tax collections process. But the easiest way to understand whether or not you're going to use this tax form is to simply read the written notice that you're responding to. So generally speaking, this form is filed in response to an IRS notice that's telling you of a specific collection action that the IRS is going to take. So pay attention to that notice. And before we get into this form, I'll point out two things that I always point out in the notice instructions. So if you want, there's an entire category of YouTube videos that we've created specifically on different IRS notices that you might receive. And the common point that I always point out are twofold. One, pay particular attention to the notice date. I'll pull up a sample notice just so that you can see what I'm talking about. So here is actually a notice LT11. That's the intent to seize your property. So basically, there should be a notice date here, and that notice date is going to be very important, particularly when it comes to the timing of your CDP hearing request. So there are usually due dates, either calendar dates or please respond within 30 days of this notice type dates. So in this case, the date is clearly spelled out right here, April 1st. That happens to be 30 days from the date of the notice. But some notices say, please respond within 30 days. Please do this within 10 days. So pay attention to the notice date. And then two, pay attention to your address because a lot of taxpayers might get into problems when they have changed their address. Usually when you're filing your income tax return, the IRS will update your records with your new address. But if you've changed your address and you're not going to file your tax return until next year, let's say that it's June, and you're not going to be filing a tax return for the next year, then that's a problem, and you should update your IRS address of record so that you get this correspondence as soon as possible. So the way you would do that is to file IRS Form 8822, which is the official change of address form, or IRS Form 8822-B, which is the change of address form for a business. All right, back to the form. So the form itself contains 2 pages, and then there's 2 pages of instructions that aren't really the most clear. So it does take a decent amount of navigating the IRS website to fully wrap your hands around the IRS collections process. However, the best way to understand what you should do is, again, to pay attention to your notice. So let's go through this for our hero, John Doe. Before we get into this tax form, I do want to point out a couple of things. There's the collection due process, and then there's an equivalent hearing. Basically, if you submit your request for a CDP meeting, but you don't meet the time frame for that meeting, then it transfers over into an equivalent hearing. An equivalent hearing is defined as a hearing that is virtually identical to the CDP hearing. However, there are two major exceptions. You cannot appeal any final decisions from the appeals office through tax court the way you could with the CDP hearing. And the second is that the collections process does not get stopped or suspended. So if you're in a collection due process hearing, if you've requested an administrative hearing, we'll go over a couple of the different hearings, then that doesn't, the time doesn't stop on the equivalent hearing. So just keep that in mind. And then the second thing is that there is a collection due process, CDP. There's also the collection appeals program, and those are available for different parts of the collections process. Generally, the CDP hearing is for if you've received a notice of federal tax lien, a final notice of intent to levy, or a post-levy collection due process notice. Whereas the collection appeals program is really before the IRS files that tax lien notice, before they seize your property. It could be as a result of a terminated or proposed terminated installment agreement, or a rejection of an installment agreement, or the modification of an installment agreement. So slightly different parts of the process. Taxpayers can request a collection appeals program consultation by filing IRS Form 9423. We'll put links to that in the show notes as well. So the primary differences between a CDP and a CAP hearing is that with a CAP hearing, you can't appeal the final result of a CAP hearing. So you can use it to appeal a rejected or terminated installment agreement, but whatever is final out of the CAP hearing, that's the end of it. You can't appeal to a tax court. So let's go through this form as if we're John Doe or our hero, and let's just imagine that he's responding to a notice. So in box 1, you would check the basis for a hearing request. So the IRS will send a notice of federal tax lien, usually before the notice of a proposed or actual levy. So we'll briefly discuss the difference between a lien and a levy. If the IRS files a tax lien on, say, your house, that doesn't mean that they're going to take your house away. What it means is that if you go to sell your house, if you go to refinance your house, then the IRS has their tax lien takes precedence over any existing mortgage. So let's just say that John Doe wanted to sell his house, but it's got a tax lien on it. He's got $300,000 of equity, but he's got a $50,000 tax lien. If he sells his house, the mortgage would get paid off, and then before he gets any of that $300,000 of equity, he would pay off the tax lien, and then he would get the rest of the proceeds. Conversely, a levy is when the government actually takes the property. So it could be a house, although the IRS generally tries to find alternative ways to seize property. So it might be garnishing a tax refund. It might be withholding a certain amount from your Social Security payments. So there are other options that the IRS will likely want to pursue before they just seize your house. But generally speaking, by the time you get the notice of proposed or actual levy, you should be responding very quickly because things are about to go south pretty quickly. So now, if you've received both notices, you received a federal tax lien notice and a levy notice, you can check both boxes. Box 2 is for the equivalent hearing. So basically, if the written request does not meet the requirements for a timely CDP hearing, you can still check this box if you want an equivalent hearing, and that's the IRS terminology. In this space, we're going to enter John's information. And then the best telephone number and time to call. So let's just say that he'd like to be reached at home and between the hours of 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. There's no guarantee that the IRS will actually contact him at these preferred times, but you can always make that request. So they live at the same address. So Mary Jane Doe will not put her separate address because it's the same one as John's. And just like John, they have a home phone number. And she's available all day. So in box 7, you would enter the tax information as reflected on your lien notice or your levy notice. So let's just say we're talking about the income tax. They file Form 1040, and this is for tax periods 2021, 2022. It could be employment, tax on whatever, 941. Could be business return on, this is a partnership tax return. Whatever the form number is. So I think that's actually 945. So in box 8, you're going to enter the reason that you're requesting a hearing. So you have to provide a reason for your dispute. You can select one of these choices. You can enter something else that you have a problem with. Generally speaking, this is not a good place to write in things that would not be a logical argument. For example, lots of people have tried to say that the U.S. government does not have the authority to impose income taxes. That's going to get squashed pretty quickly. So when you take a look at this and you're trying to complete the form, your best bet is to try and think of the legitimate reasons that are kind of right in front of you and where you fit in that. So let's go over some of these really quickly. So I am not liable for the IRS for the tax that the IRS is trying to collect. Well, that's pretty straightforward. And on the back of this are some of the arguments and kind of like what your options are. So you can disagree about how much you owe, if you didn't receive a tax deficiency notice, if you didn't have enough opportunities. So you can state that you don't owe all of these taxes. A similar argument would be down here where you've made payments and you have proof of those payments, but they weren't applied to your tax bill for some reason. And you can request this as an opportunity to sit down and say, hey, where were my tax payments applied to my tax account. I mean, a lot of these questions should be resolved before you get to the hearing, but you can still do this. Innocent spouse relief is a situation in which one spouse feels that they are, right here, being held accountable by the IRS for the mistakes or potential tax abuse of the other spouse. So you can request innocent spouse relief. You would need to complete and attach IRS Form 8857, which is the request for innocent spouse relief form. You can do that. See some of the other options. Taxes were discharged in bankruptcy. That's well and good. The IRS may still have a way to attach a lien if your bankruptcy was after the tax bill was recognized, or if there was separate property that was not part of the bankruptcy. So you can make that argument, but the IRS does try to find ways to point out where taxpayers' property is not covered by a bankruptcy case. So be very particular when you're making that case. You can also request not relief, but an alternative, either because you can't pay right now due to a financial hardship, or if you want to discuss an installment agreement or an offer in compromise. And then, of course, down here you can check something else. So let's just say that the does are interested in, they actually want to talk about the tax because they feel like some of the tax is not their fault. But then they also want to talk about a collection alternative for the rest of the tax bill. So in line 9, you would enter what your proposed collection alternative is. So in an installment agreement, you can go online. You can also file IRS Form 9465 to request an installment agreement. Sometimes you can go online and it gets approved automatically. If that's the case, then you don't need to submit a financial statement. If you have to file IRS Form 9465, it might be because your tax liability is too high, and then you would either need to attach IRS Form 433A, which is for individuals, or Form 433B for businesses. Those are collection information statements. So you would attach that information so that the IRS can take a closer look at your records. And yes, this is not supposed to be comfortable, but that's what the IRS insists on once a taxpayer has tax debt that reaches a certain threshold. So an installment agreement is for taxpayers who wish to pay their entire tax bill over a period of time, and it can be as much as, I believe, 72 months. So think of whatever you could afford in 72-month payments. That's what the IRS would be looking to get from you. An offer in compromise is where you make an offer and the IRS accepts less than what you owe. So this could be something like you owe $50,000, but you offer the IRS 40 and you can't come up with the other 10 for some reason. Then the IRS is going to either really scrutinize your records just to see if they can't help you find a way to pay off more of that tax debt, or they will kind of push back. So this is the area where if you really need to go down the road of an offer and compromise, you may be better off hiring some representation to kind of help carry the water for this, because people that have done this dozens of times, they know what it's like. They know what it's like to sit in the in a appeals meeting and discuss the merits of a case. But every taxpayer that's doing this for the first time, they're probably not going to get what they want. So, but you can make an offer and compromise. You would need to provide a financial statement unless the offer in compromise is based on a doubt as to liability. And then the third option is you're currently unable to pay. There can be extenuating circumstances where the IRS would put a pause on the collections process until you're able to get to a position where you can start making payments. But remember, the IRS's sole focus is to figure out what it's going to take to get you across the finish line. So I do want to go back to there is a part of this form where it talks about the notice of federal tax lien. So down here in this section, there's a lien resolution option. So you can choose between requesting a withdrawal of the federal tax lien because you don't think it should have been filed in the first place. You can request that the IRS subordinate the tax lien. So in the case of a house, this might be a situation where you can make payments under an installment plan, but you would need to refinance your house and maybe pull out some equity. I've done this with clients before where we had to subordinate the tax lien. Did we? No. Actually, we ended up being able to get the tax lien removed. So, but you can subordinate the tax lien, and that might be something that the IRS would consider if that makes it easier for you to make your payments. So again, if you're refinancing your house, the IRS would probably be more than happy to subordinate a tax lien if, as a part of that, they're getting some money and it makes your cash flow a little bit easier to handle. For a release, you can get it released if you pay your taxes in full, if you complete the offer in compromise, or if you adhere to your installment plan till completion. And then finally, a discharge. This is where you're asking the IRS to remove a tax lien from a specific property. So again, this would be for one property as opposed to the entire withdrawal from public records. So I did have a case with a client where we actually had to ask the IRS to withdraw a tax lien that they should not have filed in the first place. And then at the bottom of the form, basically, you're going to sign. If you're filing as a joint couple, both spouses must sign and date. If you've hired a representative, such as an accountant, an enrolled agent, or a tax attorney, then you must include a signed copy of IRS Form 2848. That's the IRS Power of Attorney document. So unless the IRS has one on file, and your representative would know whether or not it's on file, you would need to include a completed copy of that with your Form 12153. So, and then you can put your representative's name with the telephone number and whatever the date is. So, and then from that, then you can go to court if you have requested in a timely manner a CDP hearing. You can go to court and protest or have a judge look at your case to see if there's something to overturn the appeals decision. So that's how you would complete this form. And then there's additional instructions at the top. So basically, follow your notice, follow the instructions. If there's any question that you have about where to send, generally speaking, a lot of notices will have a payment address and a separate address for correspondence. Make sure you send this form to the correct address. And if you need to, call the number on the CDP notice or the 800 number that's on the top of the form. So that's the general IRS phone number, 800-829-1040. So that's all we have for this video. If you like I said, we'll put links in the show notes to some of the resources that we mentioned here. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there's a topic that you'd like to see discussed in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.